Welcome everyone to the Indie Game Spotlight Recap. This is a recap video of the indie games we played for the month of August 2019. And if you'd like to submit a game for a future Spotlight, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But this is our way of showing off games that did not get a lot of coverage, and a way of being able to show more unique titles here on the channel. And for the first one of the night, this is the Ultra Code, a kind of pseudo-programming style game. It almost feels like a Zachtronics Lite kind of design. Taking place during World War II, we are cracking, codes here in the form of logic gate style puzzles, where every gate, as you can see, the various letters can be set up to either accept or reject a command, and then have two different outputs to it. And the idea is that you need to set up the chain in line with the objective. Up there, as you can see, the code words must have an odd number of ones and no zeros. So the idea is that when it inputs a code, it will send out either a 0 or a 1. And then from there, you get a randomized set of codes on the left-hand side of the screen, and you must set up your program to accommodate any and all possible scenarios. Now, the very weird thing is that you can see that Intel reading up there. I never quite understood what was the point of Intel other than buying additional bulbs. I believe that this is set up as kind of like a way of preserving your play. That if you can solve a puzzle, you can just move on to the next one, and you can spend Intel to kind of give you more days to complete it. But during our play on stream, I never ran into the need for it, but the game does hint that there are multiple endings based on how well you succeed at it. From a design standpoint, it is very much a what you see is what you get kind of game, and I started to get into this one. Again, like if you are a fan of a lot of the programming style puzzles of something like Human Resource Machine or the titles from Zachtronics, I would say give the Ultra Code a check. And if those games are a bit too demanding for you, this one may be a great kind of first step into thinking like pseudo style about programming. Now, one thing that we didn't check on with this is if there are additional programming-based challenges. Again, everything that we're seeing here is in the form of logic gates or if-then statements and things like that. So I don't know if they do anything else further into the game, but I really did enjoy this one. And again, if you're curious about any of these games, I'll include links to them in the description down below. But with that said, let's move on to our next title. The Outpost 9 is a visual novel style adventure game that basically plays very similar or has a story similar to stuff like The Thing and 80s horror, all done through this classic or old school kind of dirty tech aesthetic. The game itself is definitely more story than adventure driven, so we spend the majority of our play or our spotlight on stream just simply reading text and watching things go. I do like the commitment to this kind of like 80s and very early computer for the aesthetic of the game, but in terms of actual gameplay or moment to moment, there really isn't much to talk about. At most, during our play, there was only one section that was kind of being just lightly adventure game style, and that came after probably a good 20 to 30 minutes of reading nothing but text. And there really isn't much else I can say about the Outpost 9. It came with 2 chapters, and Chapter 2 begins just after we have this whole adventure game section, the first one, so I don't know if things do improve, but if you're looking for kind of a very story-driven game, again, without too much in terms of gameplay, I would say give this one a check, and I don't know if they're planning more chapters at this moment. But with that said though, our next game probably has even less in terms of a moment-to-moment style. and that game is Stones of Solace. This definitely falls into the realm of a very niche concept. It's not really so much a game as it is essentially a way of meditation. As every day you get a different statue here, you can think about things, place down stickers, and it creates a screenshot for you. And that's about it. Again, as I always say, there is a fan for every game, and this one, unfortunately, is definitely not for me. And if it does work for you, then good on you. But unfortunately, I have way too many things to do on a day-to-day basis to think about meditating. So with that, let's move on to our next title here. And that would be Railed. And this is another one of those games that has a very interesting concept, but I don't think it does a good enough job of explaining what it is you're trying to do. This is kind of like a single-player board game, where your mission is to connect the various stations to important points on the map while getting randomized tracks to lay it all down. And the game itself comes with different goals, and there's a gold value in the upper right that I just could not figure out what that was like doing. Like, was it just to unlock new stuff? Was it a high score measure? I didn't know. Now, from playing it, it looks like the game makes use of RNG to determine what color rails you get, which you then have to apply to the board as you see here. But I couldn't tell if this was something that could be manipulated, or it's just by whatever is going on in the background there. The game just kind of like lets you, or leaves you to figuring it all out on your own. Now you can spend gold to get kind of like, I guess, free pieces, so you can kind of mess with them however you want. And you can change the orientation of the tracks as many times as you want before you click the button to unlock the next one, and then that previous section becomes locked. And it reminds me of a few of the tabletop games I played with friends like a few months ago, but it just didn't really seem to do all that much for me. Where something like the Ultra Code, while it was also on the complicated side, I felt it did a better job of kind of explaining not only what you're doing, but what the point of the game is. And like for me, it just never really clicked, and the audience was also kind of confused as to what was going on in this game beyond just the basic goal. Because of the fact that you're dealing with RNG also means that it makes it very hard to plan things out when you never know what you're going to get next and where you're going to place it. And I'm sure there are people who've mastered this game and have gotten a lot better at it, but for a first time experience, the game didn't necessarily work for me, unfortunately. And with that, we're about halfway done with our Indie Spotlight for this month. There was a whole lot of games that were submitted, so we're going to do a quick Patreon supporter and sponsor shout out now, and when we return, we'll get back to it with our next title. And now for a quick thank you to our current Game Wisdom sponsors and Patreon supporters. And if you'd like to continue the discussion on game design, be sure to check out our Discord channel, link down below. For our next game of the evening, this is a game that's available, I believe, on the PC and Switch, and this is Mecha Bolt. This is a puzzle platformer that's kind of built like almost like on the casual medium to maybe like moderately casual kind of level or difficulty, if that makes any sense. But the story is that our mission is to collect these batteries in order to save this robotic amusement park and to help stop the robots who have gone mad. The key element of this game is our little laser gun there that doesn't kill or hurt anything, but simply affects the robots in a different way based on its type. For instance, if you shoot the little like mushroom looking guy right there, it freezes him so you can use him as a spring. If you shoot another enemy, it may cause it to switch its direction, and other things like that. The game also makes use of a lot of spike traps for some reason, I'm not quite sure there. And the levels themselves are very self-contained, and really they're about maybe 10 to 20 seconds at most, even the most complicated levels in Megabolt. And the game is designed around essentially burning through these levels as quickly as possible. like I said a minute ago, it's not exactly an easy game. Some of the platforming may get a little bit challenging, but I wouldn't necessarily put it on the high end of the scale. The controls certainly felt right. The common complaint when we were looking up for reviews was that it is on the short side, and that may be a little bit fair. While there are, I think we said about 100 levels, give or take, in this game. Again, it's been a while since we played this one. With each level being only 10 to 15 seconds or so to get through it, meant that there really wasn't a whole lot of time to spend on this one. But with that said, it is very much a short and sweet game. Like, we couldn't really find anything I would consider to be bad with this title, and hopefully the game does well enough that we can see more from the developer. But really, that's about it for this game. No more, no less. So let's move on, shall we? For our next game, this is Nordic, and I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. This is a point-and-click adventure game, with the key draw being the kind of like paper doll or paper aesthetic, something similar to like the Paper Mario franchise. And this is one of those games that it definitely falls on the charming side of things. Very low stakes. We're not going to be fighting monsters or trying to save the world for this one. And the game, from what we play of it on stream, I think it's about 3 chapters long. Now, the game's puzzles fall on lines of, I need to get something, let me MacGyver a solution to it. Now, we did run into some problems on stream with the game crashing a few times, and the controls kind of acting up here and there. But it has a good aesthetic to it, and again, it's one of those games that if we show, we kind of spoil things. But I'll switch the footage here so you can see a few seconds of the second chapter. And from what we saw on stream, all the puzzles are essentially organic to the environment themselves. Like, we're not finding any logic situations, Towers of Hanoi, all those other crazy things like that. And from what we played, it seems like a fairly inoffensive adventure game. If you're looking for something to play that's not going to tax you too much and has a charming story, I would say check this one out. With that said, we're going to once again completely shift gears when we move on to our next game. For this one, this is Towards Gold and Glory. This is a very early build. I think it's still in alpha or pre-alpha. And what this game essentially is kind of like a board game or tabletop RPG that you can play online. The AI acts as Dungeon Master, and you and I believe up to 4 or 3 friends can play in this campaign. And the version that we played right now, unfortunately, doesn't have any of the persistent elements in. It's mainly just kind of there as a prototype of the tabletop interactions. I was playing this with Sharky, as you can see in the upper left. So the idea is that you have different classes that have different actions, and you see the actions in the bottom right-hand corner of the screen. When you choose an action and you play it, anything that involves combat or attacking enemies plays out via the game rolling, or I guess quote-unquote rolling dice. And the dice determine whether or not you hit them, how much damage you do, how much defense the enemy has, and you get the picture. You can also build up Eileen's Rage for special moves that are class-specific. And everybody gets a pet, which the pet has some kind of job or role it does as well. Now, one thing to keep in mind as you're watching the footage is that this is being played is synchronized. So when I'm looking around moving my cursor, Shark or the other players are doing it as well. So everybody is basically taking their turn at the same time, probably to cut down on the downtime of people waiting for things to go. Now, there is a reward system based on how quickly you get through a map, as well as avoiding your characters being KO'd. And again, this ties into the persistent element, and there's the meter in the upper left, or at the top of the screen, I mean. And unfortunately, because persistence is not in the game yet, it's not something we could check out. And the developer who's on our Discord channel, he is a solo dev on the project, so it will probably not be out for some time, but it does show a lot of promise as kind of giving us a tabletop RPG minus the tabletop and having to set it all up. But I think the real test or the real challenge is going to be the fact that right now it is pretty much meant to be played multiplayer only. That ideally you should have at least 2 to 3 people playing a map at once in order to get the full experience. And we don't know if there will be a single player option or kind of single with bots or that kind of thing. But if you are looking for like that kind of tabletop experience or that kind of gameplay, this could be one to keep an eye on. You cannot purchase it right now, but I think the developer may allow people to get like private builds or get access to it some other way. But with that said, we're going to move on to our next game now. And that is Witch Hunt. This is billed as an open world survival horror, that's survival comma horror, not survival horror game, I believe. We play as somebody who's in this town hunting werewolves, witches, and other strange things with very, very old-timey weapons. We're back in there where a gun can take a good 5 to 10 seconds to reload. Not exactly Call of Duty levels of combat here. We're armed with spells, and we can supposedly level up and try and figure out or grow in power. And that, in of itself, is a pretty decent hook for this kind of game. The problem is that, from a moment-to-moment standpoint, there's not really much going on, and from an onboarding point of view, the game is kind of terrible in that regard. This is one of those games that falls on the line of, you're going to fail over and over again, and we're not going to tell you why or how anything works in the world itself. And it's kind of one of those games that it just gets hurt because of it. There's a decent concept here, but as you're going to see in the footage, I'm going to die in like the next few seconds, and I still don't know why I died, or why something hurts me. We're supposed to be hunting down a werewolf as the quest, and we did not find that werewolf in about, I think it was like 30 or 40 minutes of playing this game. In fact, there's an enemy type that the game literally says is invisible, and there's no way of stopping it or doing anything. You can only pay attention to the sounds, or it will kill you. And as you saw right there, apparently we died by, I don't know, the screen turning red. And that, again, is one of those cases where developers think that they're being clever with being mysterious, but it just comes off as not being a well-defined game. And I'm sure there are people who enjoyed this title, and again, we saw glimpses of greatness here, but I can't get behind a game that I have no idea why I'm winning or losing at all. What do these skills do? I don't know. What am I supposed to be looking for? Who guessed it, I guess. And it's just such a very weird game because it paints a really good atmosphere with this very large environment, again, giant trees surrounding you. But it also has that very simple 3D look, something that we've talked about before with games that, while it may look okay, it doesn't really have a level of polish in terms of its environment, and in this case, its gameplay as well. And I just don't know what else to say about this one, because I want to see more games do this kind of open world horror, but you can't have a game be confusing and expect the player to be scared. Instead, it just makes things frustrating, and then you lose any sense of tension with the title. Now, here I am trying to kill a goat that runs very, very fast. And again, like, an enemy shows up, I kill it, then the screen flashes red and I die. And I still don't know why I'm dying in this game, because there's no pop-ups to inform me of that. But we are just about done. I think we only have one more game left for the spotlight, and we're going to switch to that one now. And this is Wipsy and the Lost Atlas, a modern retro platformer that of the games released, I think is probably like the most, I think, approachable of the games that we covered for the Spotlight. So this is as you can tell, a 2D platformer. While our main character looks heavily inspired by Kirby, it definitely plays more like almost like a more free-form, I guess, Castlevania. And the fact that our character here likes to whip. We can run, jump, we have kind of a hover as you saw there, and we go through, I think it's 4 levels or 4 worlds of challenges. Now, while the game may not look it, it can be on the harder side, thanks to its live system. Falling into a pit, hitting spikes, or running out of health will cost you a life. When you run out of lives, you must repeat the entire world from the beginning. This also includes if you get stuck at the boss. And the bosses in the game appear to be random pattern design, but only with a limited number, so they tend to repeat attacks very often. This is a game that is very much on the short and sweet side, similar to Mega Bolt that we looked at earlier. Now, the advantage that Wipsy has is that each level is distinct in terms of environment, as well as enemies and boss. So it helps to keep things from becoming a little bit on the stale side compared to Mega Bolt with all of its levels. With that said, if you're hoping for more, the game is still short, and pretty much like what you're seeing in terms of the basic gameplay and the boss fights carries over through all the levels. We actually managed to beat this game, and I think it was about 20 to 30 minutes of play on our live stream of it. So we kind of it wasn't really a spotlight, it was just an entire play. But I still like this, and if you're looking for a very short platform, but still on, I would say, the moderately challenging side, give this one a check. But with that, I am out of games for this month's Spotlight. Again, we got so many. I would like to thank developers for submitting their titles, and if you'd like me to tackle your game in the future, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But you can find the links to all the games down below. Come back for daily discussions on game design here and on game wisdom, where is in the art and science of games. And if you're working on a game that you'd like me to take a look at, please don't hesitate to get in touch. But that's going to do it for the August Spotlight stream recap, and we'll be doing another one at the end of the month, so be sure to catch that one, and tune in for daily discussions on game design here, and on game wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games. If you're looking for more wisdom about game design, be sure to check out my latest offering of books, 20 Essential Games to Study, aimed for first-time developers and students looking for some inspiration for their upcoming games, and Game Design Deep Dive Platformers if you're interested in anything regarding 2D and 3D platforming design. They're both available in print, digital, and wherever books are being sold. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoy things, be sure to do all the liking and subscribing that the kids are doing these days. Check out our Discord channel link down below where we hang out and chat game design, and come back later tonight for our regular streamings. But that's it, and tune in for more great content here and on Game Wisdom, where we examine the art and science of games.